Is Jay Leask. Today is Saturday, August 22nd. We're recording a day later than usual, but that just means the content's a day fresher when you see it. This is This Week in Teams.
Jay getting fresh with us. Hi, I'm Craig Jenke. Welcome to This Week in Teams, August 22nd edition. So,
I already
uh,
said that.
did you? I didn't hear you say that. You see, here's what happens, Jay. You start to talk, and then you go, hey, this is This Week in Teams. And I always want
And
you to say, hey, this is Vietnam. So, good morning,
ah,
Vietnam. That's what I always want you to say, but you
I
never do.
I never do.
You
I never
disappoint
do.
me.
And what you're telling me is I start talking and all you hear is Charlie Brown's mom going wah 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 wah.
It is exactly. That's why when I meet people, I don't ever know their name. So.
That's amazing.
They stick their hand out and they go blah 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 blah, and I'm like, yeah, I got no clue who you are.
Craig, what's
So,
your name?
what's your name? Say my name. Say my no.
So, no, don't start singing. Don't. I will stop this recording right now.
So it is
All right.
early. I have just had a first cup of coffee. So what are we talking
So
about
today,
today, Jay?
so today we're going to go back to basics. We've had a couple of really good episodes talking about data flex and talking about power the power platform, and then last week we talked about planner and to do. This week we're going to go back to basics and we're going to talk about what is Teams, the 101 class for Teams.
Cool. And what is Teams? How would we describe it? Because I know you get asked about it all the time, right?
So
So
this is going to
Teams,
be an
what is this
interview, huh? You're
Teams?
just going to keep asking me
I'm gonna
questions.
ask you Teams, and then no, I don't know. Teams is that collaborative platform that I like to talk about. People like to talk about. Everybody so a lot of people in the industry. I don't know what industry they are, but knowledge work.
You say something of value,
I
please.
was gonna go one way with it, and then I'll go the other. So, like business workers and whatever, you have used SharePoint for a long time.
Right.
To be able to share that file. They have also used different types of communication platforms like Skype. Some have used different other WebEx meetings and things like that. And those have kind of always been separate. And then there's always been the file shares like OneDrive or Box or things like that. So, Microsoft has had that Office 365 platform where they moved it to the cloud, is what I talk to people. So then you get SharePoint in the cloud, you got Exchange in the cloud, you got OneDrive in the cloud, then you start to get Skype for Business in the cloud. People wanted something all grouped together, right? And that's where Office 365 groups came from, a nice way to interact with these things using one identity. And then they needed to put a wrapper on it. So shortly after groups came out, then there's Teams, which kind of puts a nice wrapper around it, an interface around all those mechanisms. But underneath it is Skype for Business, Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and how that all interacts. Is that how you
So
describe it? That's how I
so
describe it to people.
so in the too long didn't listen category of what
Yes.
Craig just said, Teams is the user interface for the power of Office 365.
There you go.
So behind Teams, like you said, at its most basic level, behind Teams is a messaging platform replacing Skype, or Skype for Business. It is a file sharing platform built on top of SharePoint
There we
and
go.
OneDrive. It is a communications platform built on the traditional PBX technologies, and a video communications platform competing with things like Zoom. But then it also brings together the other aspects of Office 365, like we've talked about, the DataFlex platform for data management, the bot platform for connecting to whatever you need to connect to, the fact that you have OneNote and Planner, the fact that anyone can create an app for it, connecting to things, giving you information. So the way we describe it is we call it the hub for Microsoft 365, right?
Sure.
It is everything else is a spoke, and Teams is the hub that you go to. And as you said, it has groups for the identity portion. I always laughed when groups came out. It was a really terrible collaboration tool. Um,
Yes.
it- you know, it was really, it made me wonder if the groups team knew that Teams was coming, or if teams came and just ran groups off the rails, because groups was absolutely uh, in the commercial space, groups didn't really take off as a collaboration tool. It had a little bit of time, but teams came quickly enough behind groups that groups maybe had a year and a half, and all of a sudden teams was there.
Well,
But
I
in the
think groups
federal space, what?
framework to build off of, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, yes, yes. But like the email portion of groups, that was meant to be for collaboration. You could
yes,
email the group inbox, and it was an absolutely useless, in my opinion, way of collaborating with people. Um, so in the commercial world, teams came quickly enough that you could skip groups and go straight to teams, unless you were an early adopter type company.
right.
In the government world, we're just starting to utilize teams in the US federal government. So they've had groups for 3 or 4 years now,
Uh,
and they've relied heavily on it. And I'm like, oh, the world is going to change for you guys. Like it's not even close.
yeah,
So
you're
what
right, because
is
they don't know
teams? It's
anybody
that
that
collaboration capability.
use groups for collaboration and more just that single identity
Right.
tie together was what it was. And then, yeah, so I just kind of assumed that teams quickly came out because there was that need to make the wrapper. So
I get the feeling, and I don't work at Microsoft. I know a few people that do, but not really integrated with the product development side. I get the feeling that when something like Teams is under development, very few people outside of that team
right,
know it's under development. So I really my belief is the groups team was like, we're gonna give you collaboration. And they're going along, they're chugging along with their diesel engine, building groups, all old
yeah,
technology. And then Teams comes along, solar powered, nice lithium ion batteries, and a big, what's the business proper way of saying this? A big slap to the back of the head of groups, and was like, nope, here we are, go away.
yeah.
So back,
That doesn't surprise me.
6 minutes later, and we can't talk this long on each of our subjects because we'll be here for 10 hours. But what is Teams? Teams is a collaboration hub that connects to the rest of Office 365. That
Perfect.
that seem about accurate?
Yeah.
All right.
That is a great explanation, and then it's a more condensed version of what I talk about or what I say. But I usually have like hours to fill because it's part of an all-day workshop, right? So I want to make sure that
Likewise.
I want to make sure everybody gets their value,
Oh yeah, I
and
know
I'm
the.
not sitting there going, "Okay, I'm done." And is what is it, 10:30?
So we talked about what is Teams. Why don't you kick us off on this one? Let's talk about how Teams relates to the various capabilities. From yeah, I know in our notes we had OneDrive and SharePoint, but Outlook as well, Exchange as well. How does it relate to those three primary capabilities?
Oh, cool. So, well, we always used to, well, I like to say, people, what is Teams as far as how does it relate to OneDrive and SharePoint? And the one example we use a lot is OneDrive is me, Teams is we, and SharePoint is us being an entire organization. That's how I describe
Interesting.
it if you're going to use it for collaboration. So OneDrive is where I'm putting my personal stuff, right? Anything that I'm working on that I don't necessarily need to share with anybody, or I might only want to share with a couple people. A lot of times that can be the internal documents that I get. It can be my rough drafts. It can be anything like that. Once I decide if it's a rough draft type of scenario and not just my own personal information, I want to share it with somebody, I can share it with a couple people and get their feedback, or I can just move it into a team, which is a nice feature because that'll move like your history of that document and stuff too. So you can put that into a team. So I always use an example like an HR team is working on new policies and procedures that they want to roll out, right?
Right.
So I'm working on it. It's a rough draft. I feel comfortable that I don't look, that I spelled most of the words right and it's got some shape with it, and my team can see it, right? And they're not going to go, "What are you, a 2-year-old?" So it's they
They
look
might.
at it, and in teams we can all collaborate on it, we can message on it, we can have meetings on it, we can pull it open and work on it. And
Right.
then once it gets good, or it's the thing that we want to share it with the entire organization and say, hey, this is our vacation policy, this is what you guys should refer to, we might put that in a SharePoint communication site. So that is what I look at the whole thing. Now, that's the way that I look at it,
Ah.
is a user type of perspective. But behind the scenes, it's also the share. it's also the sharing mechanism and the storage mechanism for Teams. So that if we're in Teams and me and you are having a one-on-one chat and I decide to say, hey, Jay, do you want to look at this document I'm looking at? That's going to get uploaded into my OneDrive and you're going to get a link to it. So you can then view it, but it's residing in my OneDrive. Whereas in old times, like if we were doing that through Skype for Business or some other communication platform, it's going to actually send you a copy of it, right?
Right.
And then we have two different copies, whereas OneDrive, now we have one source of truth. And at any time, I can say, Jay doesn't need to have access to this, and I can go to my OneDrive and I can take access. So then for Teams, if we're in the channel messages and we're sharing documents, or we're in our team sharing, I can put that into a channel message, and that's going to get loaded into the team storage mechanism, and that's going to actually be a team SharePoint site. So behind the scenes, that's SharePoint. So that's kind of how they both work behind the covers as far as Teams is related. One is for storing files for personal messages, and the other one's for team collaboration purposes. So SharePoint's for collaboration purposes. And we don't do a whole lot, or I don't see a whole lot of this, but you still get that full Teams SharePoint site that you can use as a team outside of the Microsoft Teams interface that I can do. You can do pages and stuff and bring that in.
I just love hearing people try and say all of this, even though there's overlapping terminology. So, okay, so let's rewind a little bit. So OneDrive, I'm creating content myself. I might share it with a few one-off people, but it's my content. Teams is where I do work with other people, with like an inner ring type of people, the group of people I work with on a regular basis.
Collaborative type work.
Yep. And that data, so the OneDrive data, it's obvious where it's stored. It's in OneDrive. Right. Teams data is in SharePoint. Now, I love to call people on this SharePoint, OneDrive, SharePoint. OneDrive is in SharePoint, but Teams data, as you were saying, is stored in a SharePoint team site.
Yes. Make it difficult.
Which, if you've been around SharePoint longer than you've been around Teams, you understand that a team site has been around for a long time.
Yes.
The chat data, and I think this is what you were saying, if you and I are having a one-on-one chat, we're not in a team discussion, but we're in a one-on-one chat, like an old style Skype for Business, and I share file with you, that file is stored in my OneDrive. And right. Teams automatically gives it permissions for you to collaborate on that file.
There you go.
Interestingly enough, that's why I can't share a file with you right now.
Right.
Because you right now are not logged into the same tenant as me. And this is going down a rabbit hole that most people probably don't need to hear. But I'm logged into the Microsoft.
No, it's actually important because a lot of organizations use guest users.
Yes, they do.
Collaborating. Yep.
So I'm logged into the Microsoft 365 tenant for On the Spot. That is where Craig and I do our recordings. It's where we do a lot of our collaboration. Craig is logged into.
Full disclosure, I am a Microsoft employee, so I just happen to be using the Microsoft sign-in in my tenant for this. So yep. I am coming from Microsoft on this.
So Craig is a guest user right now. So if Craig and I are having a chat one-on-one, which we can, it allows for that, which is nice. He cannot share a file with me because there's no OneDrive account associated with his guest user right. for him to do that. So that's a pretty big thing. So he can share a file in Teams, in the right. team that we are in together, because there's a mechanism for that. That file is stored in SharePoint. And he has guest access to Teams, therefore he has guest access to SharePoint. Yes. So that was important. Okay. And then the us part, I like this. I hadn't heard this before. So the us isn't necessarily relating to SharePoint as a whole. The way you described
I consider the organization as a whole.
Okay. But like team site isn't related to an us. It's related to
we.
To the we.
Because we're working together.
So the us is relating to the communication sites, which is really when people talk about SharePoint nowadays, unless you're the power user type, you're talking about the modern communication sites for them, not completely. And I know there's going to be some SharePoint hardcore people who are going to tear me apart for this, But as an end user, if you are as a typical end user, when you are talking about SharePoint, you're talking about communication sites.
Right.
Because if you're talking, because if you're, yes, your intranet. Because if you're talking about collaboration, you're talking about Teams,
Right.
and the SharePoint site related to Teams. Interesting. Okay, so the me, we, us. I like that. I hope people take that away from this. OneDrive, me, Teams, we, SharePoint communication sites, us.
Yes.
I like that a lot. Cool.
No.
All right, what's next?
So then if you want to talk about how, and this is going, how Exchange fits in there, that's where you get your calendar piece from that.
Well, you get more than just the calendar piece too.
Yes.
So you get an email address. That's important to know from an end user perspective. You can email into a channel. The email addresses are terrible. Like, you're never going to remember the email address, but they exist, and you can use them to email things into a channel. And actually, the really interesting part about this is we've used this for POCs with customers, where we give that email address to a customer and say, if you want to reach anyone on this team, you send it to this email address, and then the right person will respond.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
And so it's cool, except it drives me nuts. Every response is a new thread in
Oh,
Teams.
yes.
Hey, do me a favor, like, reach your hand up to the camera and pull it away, because you just got super blurry, so that'll force it to
focus.
Maybe. No, that didn't help at all. All right, never mind. So you get an email address, and there's some really interesting use cases like I just described. Also, all of the messages in Teams, and this is not an end user thing, but all of the messages in Teams are stored on your Exchange server.
I was wondering if you knew that.
I do know that, yes. So they're stored
Why
on
is
your
that,
Exchange
Jay?
server. Why? Because that's how you do what's the word I'm looking, e-discovery on your content.
Yes, compliance
So,
searches too.
yep. So if you do your compliance search, your e-discovery, you're searching the journaled files in Exchange server. The only problem there is it's not a problem so much, but there's no end user capacity to do that. Back with Skype for Business, if you were trying to look at the historical data for Skype for Business, you would have a folder called My Conversations.
Right.
You can't do that here. All end user search, all end user access is within Teams.
You know why?
Because it's better.
Because you can go in Teams and see it. So
yeah, okay. I was like, is this a trick?
So they didn't think that there was a necessity to have those show up in two places, but I don't know. That's just what I'm going with. I've never been told that officially.
Fair enough. Okay, all right, that's good. So we talked about OneDrive, we talked about SharePoint, and we talked about Exchange Server, which is, again, an administrative function more than anything else.
But I think people should know about it.
I agree.
It's nice if you know a little bit about the back end on how it works, so that you can visualize why it makes you a better user, why your IT people are asking you things. That's what I always think, because I always hated because I told you to do it.
Right.
Most users are pretty sophisticated, and if you say, well, because it works this way, that's why we do e-discovery, or that's how we do e-discovery, right. It can help a lot.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we're 20 minutes in and 2 topics down. That's good for us. That's all right. So let's hit the next topic. Messaging versus meetings versus live events. I think this is another. You know what? No. Let's push this one to another episode. Let's move on to how do you organize your teams. The question is, when you're making a team, do you make it a functional team or an organizational team? Like, how do you approach this? Because this is actually a conversation we have a lot, and I think it's something a lot of people struggle with.
Right. So is that
Look at
you want me to answer that? I'll answer that.
So I figured I'd say what we're talking about, and you would, start talking about it.
So what I would say is the great consultant line of all times is it depends, right? How are you organized now? What are you planning on using these teams for? By default, I almost say go with an organizational structure to start with. If you have no idea, right, just make sure that if you have an IT team, they have an IT team. If you have an IT department, have an IT team. If you have an HR department, have an HR team. If you have a payroll department, have a payroll team. If those people are going to be collaborating, and start building that way. I wouldn't actually tell you to start there. I would almost tell you always to start with your IT team, because they're going to be implementing and rolling this out, right? So they're going to be your pilot users. Then start looking at functions. What type of functions? Are there groups of people that maybe cross departments that need to work together, and what are they going to be doing? What are they going to be collaborating? And start setting up my functions that way. And then I often see just a whole section of teams, just specifically projects. I'm going to go to Jay.
There you go. No, I was saying your microphone just went out. You got super quiet again, but it sounds like it's back again.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. No.
So what did you hear, Jay?
No, I heard everything you said. It just got really quiet for a little bit.
Okay.
But no, I agree with you. When we have these discussions, the IT department is usually the first team that's created. One of the first functional teams that's generally created is a governance team. Yeah, somewhere, because a governance team is usually made up of cross-department people, someone from IT, someone from security, someone from end users of some sort. So that's usually a really good first functional team to create. Another really good first functional group to create is your champions team. And that is the team of teams trying to get people to get excited about teams. Champions are people that you bring in to be out in the field helping other people understand the value of teams, and then bringing feedback back to you. So a champions team is another really good functional one. So I mean, the short answer is, should my teams be made up of organizational or functional teams?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
They should both.
Right. It's which one is right for me. It depends. And it really, so Microsoft thinks of Teams as an inner loop collaboration tool. And what inner loop refers to is the people that you collaborate with regularly. So I have a team for the solutions engineers. That is our global SE team.
Right.
And that's our department. I also have a team for public sector sales, and that is also departmental, but it's cross-functional because it brings people in from the product group. It brings people in from the customer success group. And that way we can all focus on helping identify and solve our customer problems. What about you? Name some of your teams.
If I'm guessing, you also have teams for every customer that you do.
Actually, no, we don't.
Ooh.
Yeah. So what we did was we created the U.S. public sector team. And then we created underneath that a channel for each of our salespeople. And then underneath that, we use threaded discussions, one for each opportunity. So every time we have a new opportunity, we create an opportunity in CRM. We create a matching discussion thread with the same name and link back between them. And then all of the conversations for that opportunity happen in that discussion. Our delivery organization, client services, does create a team for each customer. But on the sales side, we don't. So, we do have to keep it separated.
We tend to do a team for the customer and then channels for the products that they might have.
Yep.
So Office 365 would be a channel. Dynamics would be a channel.
Okay.
If they're using, Azure services, some kind of, if there's something more than complex type of service type of thing that they might be using.
So Craig, let's talk about the next subject, more than what Teams is. So we've talked about Teams as a hub for SharePoint and OneDrive for messaging, or what the data that's stored in Exchange, what we just talked about. We talked about the calendar that you get with Exchange. That was a good call. But what else can you do with Microsoft Teams? That's the other thing. That's the power behind Teams, right?
Well, I think you could rule the world with it.
I mean, fair enough. If you go back to Stacy's conversation, you create a planner, put a planner in there, and now you've got your project plan for ruling the world. I like it.
Yes. No, sorry. You can actually do a lot. So it kind of depends on where you want to go with that, right? Do you want to extend it? Because there's always, as you said, the data flex and there's Power Platform. So do we want to do something more I don't know, coder type of stuff, right? We can use Power Apps, we can use Power Automate, we can do
Right.
those kind of things. We can use the SharePoint framework and actually start coding stuff. Not what most of our end users are wanting to do, but what I really love is on the top of any channel you have the tabs thing, right? So where you
Right.
can
Right.
start
Right.
adding in apps that already exist and play nicely with SharePoint. So we have what we call the first party apps. So this is going to be an administrator type thing, like Planner, like Yammer Communities.
Well, wait. You called it an administrator thing. What do you mean by that? Because that took me off guard.
So you can add apps, right? So
Right.
for the average user, they're going to go up and they're going to go. We're going to add a tab to our team,
Right.
or if
Right.
we're on the side, we're going to add a connector. What are we going to add?
Right.
For the user, you just get a list of apps.
Right. Right.
But from an administrator, what am I going to let my users have?
Okay. Let's hold that conversation. I don't want to talk about that today. Let's talk
Yeah,
about for the user. Let's say your administrator is all kind and
all
generous
in.
and
Yeah,
gives you
so
access to everything. So that's that. Let's have that conversation.
then you can be able to add like planner tasks, a Power App. If you already got Power App, you can pull that in.
Right.
Anything Microsoft that's in the Office 365 suite, there's probably an app for it. There is an app for it. You can also get access to other things like Poly if you want to do
Yep.
polls and things like that. Salesforce if I want to bring that kind of data in, and I have. So that's where you're getting a little bit administrator, because that's an expensive little app to have, right?
All right. So
So
you were saying the first party app. So first party apps, you've got a website tab. That's
yes,
the night. I like the website tab because it means you can put anything in your team. As long as it's got a web interface, you can put that in there.
yeah. So you're
And we
just
use that
basically
all the time.
creating a window to link to a website.
Right. You've got communities now. So Yammer redeployed how they interact with teams, and you have the communities feature. And
I love
the
that.
so you use communities now. That's
I never used Yammer.
okay.
I had occasionally used Yammer,
Okay.
but I didn't want to go to Yammer to do it. But now that I can add the communities tab to my team, and I have it on my guardrail on the side,
Yep.
um, I use it all the time.
Okay.
Or not all
All
the
right.
time. I use it a lot more than I ever did. So that
All
brings
right.
Yammer into Teams, and I check for updates and I get notifications and stuff like that.
Excellent. All right. Now, you also have like a flow option, a OneNote option, a planner option. We talked about planner last week a lot.
Right.
And then you have bring any of your office tools in. So you have an Excel option, and you
Yes.
can load a spreadsheet right there. So if your team is working on something that's in a spreadsheet, you can put that spreadsheet right in the tab, and it's now part of what you're doing. So all these first party apps are basically anything you can think of in Office 365. The second or third party apps, I don't know,
Third
what's the
party
second
apps.
party app? So
There's
the
no.
third party apps is let's talk about fifth party apps. The third party apps, you mentioned Poly is a great one. The ability to create polls, to praise people, um, uh, things like I'm just looking at it right now. There's
I
literally
know
so
ADP
many.
has one, so if you wanted to bring in like payroll information, like so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Now,
Oh,
so AvePoint has one. We have a
yes.
couple actually. We're a software company. We created an app that interacts with our software platform. Our software platform is governance for Office 365, and we created an app in Teams that lets end users interact with the governance platform, which is perfect because now they're in Teams all the time, and you're seeing a lot more of that. So that's not a pitch for AvePoint. Jira has ones where you can interact with
That was the
Jira.
one I was going to mention.
Yep.
Jira is a popular one.
Yep. So there's a lot of third party apps, and more. Don't think of it as your phone platform where everyone's making an app for everything. It's yes, that's possible, but it's designed to bring all of the other corporate information into Teams that's not stored in Teams, right?
Yes, that is correct. So
Okay.
you're really working to make Teams, that central, as you say, hub, right, for work.
Yep.
I want to be able to go in, log into Teams, pull it up, and never really have to leave it.
Right.
As a worker, because that's where you lose productivity, right? So because I got to click open this tab, and I got to click open this, if I got to open 5 or 6 different applications to do stuff that I could normally go to one user interface to get. Let's just say that takes me 30 seconds to open all 5 of those, where if I was in Teams, I could get it done in 5. So let's
Yep.
go 35 seconds. So you're talking 30 seconds per user spending extra time to do that. If you've got a staff of 10,000 people, you're talking 5,000 minutes a day over the course of an enterprise. That's a lot of lost time and that you can quickly recover in productivity that people don't think about. You got to think the high numbers, the big numbers, it's not whatever. But yeah, so we're just trying to make everybody and build that user adoption too, because we're paying for Teams. So we want to be able to get the most out of it, get that return on investment. We don't want it to be that application that nobody wants to go to, but we're paying for it anyways.
Okay, so what did we talk about today? We talked about what Teams is, being the hub for all of the connectivity of Office 365. But more than that, the hub for connectivity across the enterprise, by using these either third-party apps or even your own custom apps, which connect into your databases, connect into your knowledge shares, all of that stuff brought in. We talked about what Teams is built on. So SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange server, all of that data being stored there. And then we talked about like how do we organize our teams? Like how do we do I create a functional team? Do I create a department team? Who can create the team? That's a conversation for next week. So what are we going to talk about next week, Craig?
We are going to talk about teams. What are they? No, not teams. What are they? But who should you have in your team? Who are your owners? Who are your members? Who are your guests? And how did that happen? The other thing we're going to talk about, what is a meeting versus a chat. Like this is more of a chat. A meeting would be more of a scheduled thing. And then live events, which are those things that more and more people should be taking advantage of, but aren't. And we'll go into a little bit of why that is. Then we will talk a little bit more in depth. I think I brought it up. What's the difference between a first-party app and a third-party app? Just so that you can know as a user, so that you can explain to your IT team why you need the third-party app, and then ways that they'll understand. And then I lost the rest of my list, Jay. What else are we going to talk about?
We'll talk about some basic governance stuff. Who can create a team? How do we govern it? How do we, naming policies, things along those lines. Nice catch. I like that. Things along those lines. Like how do we keep our teams? How do we keep our teams safe and organized? And how do we keep our data controlled? Yeah. So that'll be next week. Cool. Or the week after. It'll be in the future.
It'll be sometime in the future. And ideally, we'll have some little other tutorial videos to go alongside this.
I'm not even talking about that until they come. No, that's a good point. So, Craig, you've kicked off Time for Teams as a series, and hopefully you'll take these. We talked about 4 things today. We got 5 or 6 things lined up for next week. You'll start building Time for Teams episodes around those. That would be good. Yeah,
that would be good. And Jay, we'll get you building some too, because
nonsense. That's. I mean, people do love me. That's a true story. How could you not love this?
They want more of Jay.
Thanks, Craig. All right. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for your time today. Craig, I'm glad you suggested this. This was a good conversation.
I do actually think it's a great conversation, because a lot of, it's basic, and it's what a lot of people need to know once they're starting teams. Now I'm going to go it's Saturday morning. I'm going to go get my jelly donut, because that's really feeling what I need right now. I not actually like jelly donuts, but I'll get one.
Okay. Well, you have
maybe
fun
Bismarck.
with that.
I like Bismarck's more. So.
I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee and get my new Samsung Note 20 phone. So there you go.
Sweet. And if anybody's still on, please subscribe to our channel.
Before you go, I never understand where it is. Hit the button over there. Subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends. Tell them why this was so entertaining and valuable.
Let's not oversell it.
Thanks, Craig. Have a good one.
All right. Talk to you later.